Hey guys, this is Nick and Rest, and this is She Wolf Alchemy. Today we are already talking about anxiety.
So, yeah, we're talking about anxiety. Anxiety is like really common today. Usually, when you say anxiety, people already know exactly what you're talking about because a lot of us are walking around with some form of anxiety one way or another. So, first, before we get into the topic, let me just break down what anxiety is. It is an intense, excessive, and persistent worry, and it's a fear about like everyday situations. So, with that general term, Neek, is anxiety something that you struggle with?
Yes, it definitely is something that I struggle with. I was just telling a friend last night that I believe I've been struggling with this since a child. I don't know where it stems from. Then I started to analyze and say, like, is this something that's hereditary? Because I look around and it's a lot of my family members on both sides have the same struggles. But it is still something today that I am struggling with, and I try to get it under control.
What is your anxiety struggles?
Sometimes I feel like I have social anxiety. I didn't know that's what it was as a child, but in new situations, they always make me extremely anxious. I know, like when I was as a child, like we moved a lot. So like the last time we moved, I got really anxious. I think I locked myself in a car and I told my mommy, like, this is the last time that we have to move. And just meeting new people, it made me anxious. So a lot of times throughout my childhood, a lot of times my friends would talk for me because I'm just like, I was so anxious. Like they say, don't talk about, or they just stand up and talk for me because yeah, it just took a lot for me to express myself. And now as an adult, I still have times, I still have those same anxious moments. Like it'll be at work, I'll go out the back door, so I have to walk through a lot of people because I don't want those people because I feel like I'm going to have to talk to these people and I don't want to talk to them. So it's some days I have those feelings and other days I'm okay. But, and I don't know what triggers it this time or that time, but I know it's a thing. But is it something that you feel that you experience or go through?
Yes, definitely. I feel like I'm a lot better at managing it, but I definitely feel like when I was younger, I had a lot of anxiety. So much so that I'm not sure if I am better at managing it or if it's just such a part of my everyday life that I don't notice it as much.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of like it's just a part of being like, that sounds horrible, like it's a part of being me. Kind of
And
like,
that's the thing. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Kind of like you, I had a lot of like things just changed very fastly in my life, especially when I was younger. Things would just always change out of nowhere. And so it made me very, very anxious. And I've talked about this before. I was a very serious child. I was definitely the child people used to call the old soul. I was definitely,
Same.
yeah. And it was because I was just really anxious. I was just always like, okay, when's the next thing's gonna drop? Let me prepare for how this could possibly go wrong. I was that kid. I was like not really hopeful as a child because I'm just like, we don't know how long this is gonna last. We don't know when the next thing is gonna happen. We don't know when. And so it kind of made its way into my adult life like that, where I didn't have a plan for the backup plan for the backup plan. Actually, this is probably the first time in my life that I don't. And I think that's why I freaked out so much. In 2020, guys, I went through like a really like dark night of the soul type of experience. We still there. But I think also that was a part of it. Like it shook me out of that because not shook me out of it, but like I was not expecting to like have this like emotional revelation or experience where I really had to learn to sit with myself. I really had to learn to deal with myself and my feelings and my emotions. It's still not something I do naturally. It's still something I have to remind myself. It's a process, but during that period, that was a point where I no longer started having like, okay, I have a plan for the backup plan, blah, blah, because I was too busy dealing with my emotions, which I was not used to. Like those were things I just put on the side and, shrugged and like it'd be like that and just went on about my life. But up until that point, and I was like, what, 28 at that time? Up until that point, like that's how I lived. Always just expecting the worst, always just kind of terrified, always kind of just like, okay, let's think about all the ways this could go wrong. Like it was really hard for me to enjoy things because I just had this like intense fear about stuff that people normally don't fear. Even so much as like going back to school, like talking, even though I knew the answer and I knew that I was correct, I would doubt myself. And then I'd like, and then you say the wrong thing. And then people think you're dumb. And then blah, blah, blah. And like, if I got called on, I would be terrified to talk. And then I would literally say something completely different than what's in my head as well. That was another thing that caused me to like have issues with that, because it was very hard. It's to this day, it still is. My boss recently just was talking to me about doing presentations, and I was like, girl, like that was my response. I was like, oh baby, no, I don't make sense when I talk. Like I be having a whole different dialogue in my head that sounds so great, but it comes out as blah. This is the hardest. I didn't tell her that exactly. I said it in a more professional way. But podcasting is different because I have more control. Like before y'all get this, I cut out a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. I'm talking to Neek. That's very different than talking to a crowd of people and people staring at you and looking at you and expecting you to have the right thing to say it without saying every 5 seconds. Y'all don't know this. I say every 5 seconds because I edit it out. But if you ever listen to my interviews on any other podcast, you will recognize I say a lot and like a lot. I try to cut it out for y'all. So for me, yeah, it's definitely a thing. I feel like I'm not sure if I'm better at it or if I'm less conscious of it, but it's definitely something that I've definitely experienced myself.
Yeah.
But you know what? Knowing that as an adult, as a parent, is something I used to try to build up in my daughter to have confidence and not to be anxious. Like I'm really big on letting my daughter be her, because I didn't have that in my childhood. I was a pastor's kid. Like I was not acceptable. Not that I wasn't acceptable. My parents love me. They still do. And they're amazing parents. But one, they're very different people than they were then. But also like there was a certain way I was supposed to act. Like I was a pastor's kid. Like I was not supposed to be wilding out. I was not supposed to, I was supposed to go to Bible study. I was supposed to be reading my word. I was supposed to be doing all this stuff. And that also added to my anxiety. I think I've mentioned this before. Like I was very, very conservative when I was younger, but that was never my true personality. And the more I felt comfortable in myself, the more I started to be in myself, the easier it was for me to look back and realize why certain things made me anxious. And it's because I was wearing a facade. It's easy to be anxious when you know that's not you. And you're like, I don't want to slip up and let my mask off. And y'all realize that I'm not this good pastor's kid, daughter, person, whatever, that I'm not this angelic little angel type of thing. And so I really work really hard on trying to do that with my daughter. And y'all, she make it hard. She make it so hard. Yeah, my daughter marches to the beat of her own drummer. Me and her have very different personalities. Like my daughter is a huge people person. She would go up to strangers and just say her name and be like, hi, you want to play? You want to be my friend? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm not that, like, especially when I'm outside of my work role. In my work role, I feel like people think I'm more extroverted than I actually am. But when I'm in my private life, like I'm actually very chill mode. I'm very like when we were younger and we would go out, Neek would be the person on the dance floor talking to new people. I would be on my phone in a corner somewhere. Mm-hmm. And like to this day, that's still me. I'm not a party person. I'm not when we go places, I usually have a book with me. I'm very low key. But my daughter's the exact opposite. And I have to constantly remind myself, like, I don't want her to feel stunted in who she is because who I am is at odds with it. And so I'm constantly trying to make sure I'm encouraging her to be her true self, and that I'm even putting myself in situations and positions that I don't want to be in. Like my daughter, is summertime and my daughter wants friends, and I don't like talking to neighbors. I don't like going out and meeting other parents, but I know like that's a thing for her. She wants play dates. So now I got to find parents with kids so we can have play dates. Now I got to go talk to strangers. I don't want to while we're at the park. So, see if they want to meet at the park again next week so she can build a bond with somebody else, and all these different things that I normally wouldn't do, because I'm like, you know what, that would have really, really helped me back then if my parents had did that for me and let me just be me, encourage the things that were natural to me instead of pushing things that were natural to them. Yeah.
And it's just like, it's funny because we always say that we just have flip-flop kids. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because my daughter is more like you. She's laid back. She don't talk to other people in public. She like kind of like clams up, and I try to get her out of that. And I'm like, now that you're saying, like, should I even like try to force her I probably shouldn't be trying to get her
Mm-hmm.
to interact if she doesn't want to interact. It's just her. It's just her. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just like sometimes I'm like, go talk, but she doesn't like new people. She has to really feel the scene out, like,
Yeah.
and she'll come at her own time. She is you, like, it's like,
Yeah.
it's like if she doesn't feel it, if she don't feel it the whole night, she
Mm-hmm.
won't. But it really takes her time to, like, I have to scope the scene. I have to figure out who all these people are. Like, if I'm feeling this energy, like,
Mm-hmm.
girl, just
Energetically
go out there and
sensitive.
have fun. Yeah, she is. And I'm like,
Yeah.
let's just go out there and have fun. Like, I'm like, Kari, let's go dance.
Mm-hmm.
And even we went on vacation, that was like, me and Kari was going to go dance in the phone party, and Journey
Yeah.
and you were sitting
Yeah.
there, like,
me and Jody were chopping it up.
right. I was like, okay, Kari, come with me. Like, but it's hard because I am like your daughter. Your daughter is like mine. But anyways, so anxiety is like one of the most common diagnoses in the US
Mm-hmm.
today. And with us as millennials, especially, we always hear people talking about being anxious or having anxiety all the time. But why is it? Why is it so common now? So first thing is that it's not really new. Anxiety has been around since we realized we had to run from dinosaurs. We are just finding the words to describe an age-old feelings and putting our mental health and its importance first.
Yes. People says things like, y'all talking about ADHD. We even have ADHD in my day. You did, we just didn't have the word for it. You know, whenever people are like, in schizophrenia, we didn't even have that back in our day. Y'all just called it something different. You would just say, oh, he a little special. We had all these things, but we didn't have the name for them. People didn't talk about it. People really hid their mental health issues until like recently. Like, I remember the first time I went to therapy, it still was hush hush, especially as a Black woman. You didn't talk about it. Like, I remember when I was 19 going to therapy and being in college and like not telling any of y'all because I was like, I don't want them to think I'm crazy. I don't want them to, and it's still having that stigma. And so I think it's important to remember that, like, no, it's not this new thing that we created. It always has been a thing. It's just something that we're now finding the terms from. And we're just now finding a place where people feel open about talking about their mental health and people are encouraging us to put our mental health first. But specifically when it comes to millennials, I do think that there are certain things that are special to our category. I think there's things that are special to us as a generation. There's certain things I think we definitely went through, which is why it's been such a big push, along with technology and us just being more open with things in general. But like, one, we are low-key the generation of chaos. Like, millennials, we grew up with nothing but uncertainty. Nothing has been certain since the mid-'80s. We grew up with divorce being normal. We're like the first generation where a lot of us had parents that were divorced. A lot of us grew up in single parent households, or we went with dad on the weekend type of thing. That wasn't really a thing before our generation. We're also the first generation that had to realize the more educated you are does not necessarily correlate with good pay.
Yeah.
In our parents' and grandparents' generation, the more education you got, the more money you make. That is not necessarily the truth today. We are a generation that grew up with seeing things like 9/11 on our freaking TV screen as it was happening. We are the generation that grew up with mass shootings.
Didn't that happen? Didn't that start happening when we were in elementary?
Yeah, it started happening when I was in elementary. It started happening in the 90s. I think Columbine was the first time that happened in the US. Even though that happened in the 90s, and like there was some that happened when I was like in middle school, and it was like a little bit that happened while I was in like high school. It wasn't nowhere near as common as it is now. But like, all I remember is they installed locks on the schools when I was going to school. Like, that became a thing when I was like in middle school, high school, where you could not just go to the high school and open the door, walk in. They start installing, like, you have to ring the buzzer, they have to verify who you are, who your child is, and all. And you would necessarily even need to come into the school in the front office. Like, it was a whole thing where like they would tell parents to ring the doorbell and they'll send your kid out to you. That was a thing, like, when I was in
our school too. Yeah. At the school I'm at right now, we have drills, and Journey's new school. We had to ring the bell, and they still don't. I still haven't been in there. They just keep coming to
Yeah.
get my paperwork at the door.
And I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But the problem with that is that some of these, especially when it comes to school shootings, is that these are students also that are doing most of the shootings in the school. So it's like, yeah, it prevents from other people, but if they go there, they also know the plan for what to do in case of an active shooter because you train them as well, which is why the solution is not more locks, bulletproof backpacks. No, the solution is gun control.
Yeah.
Because also there's shootings that are happening outside of the school too. And what do we do for that? Yeah. We can't turn every place into a prison. We are the only country in the world where this is a continuous problem. But with that being said, like, we are the generation of chaos. We have a lot of stuff that other generations, they did not. And not saying other generations didn't have their stuff. They all had their stuff. But like, a lot of these things are stuff that really the millennials, it just started happening with us. And so we didn't grow up in a time where you can get a factory job and be a homeowner on that type of income. My parents could. That was their generation. My grandparents could. Yeah. Like, we have people legit with master's degree who, like, the idea of becoming a homeowner is seeming farther and farther off because we have so much student debt. The economy is horrible. Wages is not keeping up with the cost of housing and living and expenses and all these stuff. Like, our generation has grown up in a time of just like uncertainty, it seems like, all the time, which I think is a big part of why we have so much anxiety. I think the generations before us, their parents were able to give them maps and directions on how to be an adult, and it worked. You go out and you go to high school, graduate. You get you a good job and you stay with them for 30 years. Make sure you get that pension. You know, the Ford factory, they give you a good pension. You find you a good woman, you settle down, try not to have no outside babies, or, you know, try not to have more than one outside baby. And then, you know, life, you get you a house and you good to go. You join the military, you good to go. That was working for our grandparents' generation. That was working for our parents' generation. But those instructions that parents used to be able to give does not work for us. Making $60,000 a year sounds good until you realize your student loans is $600 a month. That one bedroom is going to cost you $1,200. The government already takes $800 out of your check for taxes. So even though it seems like you make $5,000 a month, they take every check, $800. So you really only bringing in like $35. The old blueprint for the world is not working. We're entering a whole new type of world. We started off as a whole new type of world than our parents did. And we're trying to figure it out. And I think that's a big part of why our generation is the anxious generation, a generation that anxiety is almost like a normal part of being.
But it's even like, I think the older generation anxiety too, because they don't know how to like deal with the new norms. I know one of my family members, she went back to school, she got this good degree, and she expected to move up. And then she, like, all of the younger kids was in there. So the younger kids was taking over her position. And she just didn't know how to keep up with all of that. And it was just like, this isn't how it works. This, you know, and she really started to, that's when she really started to have like anxiety attacks. And she just didn't know what to do. It was just like, it's just like, I did all this stuff and I still get nothing, and she felt like less than. It brought her a lot of anxiety when she started having to be diagnosed and taking medication for it.
Yeah, because it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And then I think on top of that, we have the added, like, we're the first generation. We're the first social media generation.
Yeah.
Social media was started in our generation. And then it's like, so on top of everything going on in your everyday life, it also feels like we're being told, like, you have to still present yourself as elite and luxurious to the rest of the world while you're struggling, while you are on the edge, while you are barely making it. And I'm not even talking about financially, I'm talking about emotionally barely making it. And then you go on Instagram and you see everybody's happy, you see everybody, you trying to figure out, okay, me and her got the same job. I know for a fact she did not make more than $62,000 a year. How the fuck is it that she is in Jamaica, Costa Rica, and Turks and Caicos, every 3 months. I don't, okay, what am I doing wrong? Okay, then maybe I need to get 2 jobs. Maybe I need to do a hustle. Maybe I need to, and I think that adds to the anxiety, because now it's not only am I anxious because of the expectations I have for myself, the expectations I have for my family, but now I'm seeing everybody, not just my neighbors, not just my mama and daddy's friends, not just my friends. I'm seeing kids in New York. I'm seeing kids across the world who are 22 and billionaires. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I think it just adds that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People that only show off the good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another reason why anxiety is so prevalent right now is that a lot of times we act like it's non-existent and we just cover it up with like drinking, alcohol, sex, and we just run away from the problems that's causing these things and trying to, take them on head first, and we just try to cope and cover them with alcohol, drugs, and even sometimes sleep. Not just not get your normal healthy sleep. Just like I'm about to go, just sleep, take a nap because I don't want to think about it. I know that's personally one of mine that I did throughout my whole life. My friend Bree, she was always like, "What trying to get her doing? Sleeping?" Yeah, I just got to nap. Like I'll set my alarm just for lunch, just for dinner time, so we can eat our dinner dates because we used to go to the cafe to eat dinner. But girl, after it's just I'd be too overwhelmed. Like it was too much stimulation. Like going to all these classes, talking to these people. I need a nap to just calm everything down, and then I wake up feeling refreshed, and I can go do another activity. But I'm gonna have to go back. I wasn't drinking at that time. I was sober my whole freshman year, so it was just like this is my thing. My thing of choice is I'm gonna take a nap. So yeah, those things can't cover it. And it wasn't like, and I didn't know that's what I was doing. I just know I felt refreshed after I did it. So, and I didn't have to think about things. So these are things that cover it up and allow us to run away from what's really going on.
Yeah. I think it's a big, because it's just trying to give yourself another feeling. Like you want to feel something else, and you're not. And the problem with it is there's something wrong necessarily with wanting to feel something else, but you're not addressing, okay, but why am I feeling this? What exactly is it I'm feeling? All people typically know is like, okay, I am feeling really off and I don't want to feel off. So let me do this other thing, whether that other thing is sleep excessively so I don't have to feel anything at all. Or like you said, drugs and like alcohol, where it's just like, okay, for example, we all know somebody who like they can't have fun unless they're drinking. They're that person that's like, okay, well, it's fine, just give me some alcohol, then I'll be good. And it's because that alcohol, it tones down that anxiety.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah. And even me when I was younger, that was the thing for me. Like I could not have fun. And I'm very sensitive to energy, y'all. I'm very, very sensitive to it. And so I don't like being in large crowds or whatever. It just makes me very, very tense and uncomfortable. But with that said, like when we were younger and we used to go out, like a lot of the times I would be in the corner and I'll be just doing my own thing. But the times I did actually like go out and have fun with you guys on dance floor, a lot of times like a lot of alcohol was involved because it toned down and it numbed those feelings of anxieties and numbed those feelings of being very hyper aware of everything around me type of thing. And that is what you're doing. Even when it comes to talked about sex, that is the same thing as well, where you just want to take away the feeling of that anxiety, which you might not even know what it is. And I think that's something that happens a lot with people in our generation, not to pick on the males, because females, we definitely do this as well. But yeah, you'll see these guys and you're like, you just go through woman after woman after woman that can't be healthy. And you'll have people that argue like, yeah, that's not healthy for you, but that's healthy for me, and blah, blah, blah. And I definitely used to argue that myself. And then just over time, maturity, studying, knowledge, realizing like, no, that is you running from something. That is you not processing something. That is you like the argument like, no, that's just nature, especially people that try to say that's the nature of men. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, y'all. I came with the hoteps that want to throw into the whole, because black men, they used to treat black men, slaves, like bucks, and they would take them, the biggest buck, to impregnate multiple women. And that's why I can't be faithful now. Like, yes, but even that was something unhealthy that was put into you. That's not nature. That's not natural. That's passing down generational trauma. That's what that is. Yeah. And that's fine. You don't want to stop it. That's cool. You keep passing that on, but you got to understand certain things I personally believe certain things you energetically transmit to your kids when you don't break that cycle. And you might be saying to yourself, like, well, they ain't seeing it. First of all, usually they are.
Yeah.
Let me just very clear. Usually they are. Kids are a lot more aware of stuff than you think. But also, again, we are finding that there is research being done now that shows that trauma is passed through our genes.
Mm-hmm.
They did a study, I want to say it's in Rwanda. Guys, don't quote me on this. I can't recall. I want to say it's in Rwanda. If y'all care enough, if you DM me, I'll go ahead and find the article on it. But basically, the article talked about how they did research of people, I want to say it was Rwanda, I can't remember, but it was a war-torn country. And they followed refugees when they went to other countries, and they had kids, the kids that were not in this conflict. They did not see the war, they didn't witness the war. But what they found out is that these kids had PTSD. And these kids were having depression and so forth. And what they were finding is that even though they didn't go through it, some of the kids were in the mom's bellies when they were pregnant. And they're like, no, you're sending that stress to your kid when you're pregnant.
You are.
But they were following them, and they were finding out, no, PTSD and stuff like that, that's passed down through generations, because our body, there's a book that a lot of psychologists and therapists have to read in grad school. Even if they don't, usually if you're in the field, somebody else will recommend it to you. The book is called The Body Keeps the Score. And this is a book that talks about how our body remembers emotions. And basically, this was a doctor who, over time in his study, he was saying he started to recognize, though, that like he had clients that were experiencing things and still holding on to things that like he could not understand. He was just like, why is it that this is triggering you in this way? And basically what he found out is that our body holds memory. Our body remembers trauma. Our body holds on to that. So even though we're like, oh, I don't know where this came from, our body still remembers. Our body still.
Look, that you were talking about, our body keeps the count.
Our body keeps the score.
But I believe it, because I wonder sometimes it was the effect of my pregnancy her as well.
Yeah, no, I joke about it a lot, but I realize like, no, that's a serious thing. Is when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was doing a lot. I was in school. I had internships that were an hour away from there. So I was spending like between 2 to 3 hours in traffic a day. Like up until the day before I delivered, I was still going to classes, going to school, doing that type of stuff. And I was just stressed all the time. I had totaled my car. I was in grad school, so it wasn't like I had money just laying around because I was working part-time as I was in school. I had a lot of things I had to figure out what I was going to do, because I was in another state where I had no family. I had, nothing but, my ex at the time as my support. And I had to make a lot of decisions, and I had to do a lot to keep myself afloat during that time. And I was nonstop. I didn't really rest in my pregnancy. I didn't really get to enjoy my pregnancy. All the stuff that people talking about they're doing, like I didn't take any photo shoots during my pregnancy and so forth. We didn't do any of that. And I joke a lot and say like, that's why my daughter's so active. It's like the whole time I was pregnant, I did not sit. I did not chill. I was always in the middle of doing something. I was starting my days at 7 a.m. And starting, like actually doing work, not getting up. I was getting up at 5, and I wasn't ending my days until 9. Mm-hmm. And I used to joke a lot, like, yeah, that's why my daughter's like that. That's why my daughter can't sit down. That's why my daughter always got to be in the middle of something. But then I thought about it. I was like, no, I really think that's why my daughter is like that. Because the whole time she was developing in my stomach, I was on go mode. I didn't rest. I didn't stop. I didn't enjoy.
And me, I was still doing those milestone things, I guess, but I was stressed the whole time, trying to figure out where I was going to live, trying to figure out wanting to be with my late fiance at the time. Like it was just a lot. It's just like it was a lot. So I'd be wondering if that's why. I don't know. You just wonder. And I don't think our parents even think to wonder about all this, but they didn't have all the resources and know all of this. I don't feel as much back then. Yeah. So now it's just like, I got to fix this. Or I got to figure out how we're going to talk through this or something. Because, it can really like be passed down somehow.
Yeah, it can. And research is showing that we still don't quite understand how it works and so forth. But that is one of the things they are saying. And it's why you'll see an increase in practices such as meditation, mindfulness, and grounding, because all those are about getting your body in sync with your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know even myself, when I bring it up in with my own clients, they'll just be like, oh my gosh, no, like, I want to talk about the trauma and I want to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yes, but our body does keep the score. Our body does remember. And you want to start connecting your body with your mind. You want to be able to say, okay, like, where do I feel this in my body? Why am I having this triggering experience? It's saying that it integrates our traumatic memories. And that is why sometimes we'll get triggered and we might not even know why we're being triggered, but our bodies and our memories are reacting to that trigger as if that thing was happening right now. Mm-hmm. And it's why a lot of times when people get triggered, like PTSD, you've heard examples of PTSD of soldiers coming back from war. And then during 4th of July, I once dated somebody that was a career military man and was in the military for over a decade. And with him, like, one of the things I had to learn is like he had to keep himself away from the public around 4th of July, because it was extremely triggering for him hearing the firecrackers and so forth go off. And so, like, that was a thing for him. Like, it brought back, like, he would hear that and panic because his body would react as if he was back in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. And so that's what that book kind of goes over and discusses. And that's one of the things that is being talked about a lot more in psychology today, is that, yeah, we'll start feeling that stuff as if it's happening right now in the present. But anyway, so with that said, like, when it comes to things like alcohol, drugs, sex, sleep, and stuff like that, those are all ways for us to unconsciously, because a lot of times we're not conscious of it, not feel those things. Because it's like you can feel, you're like, I know when this happened, this is going to dull that feeling of anxiety that pops up, that feeling of whatever it is that pops up. I got a little bit off subject and I do want to get back to it. But what I was talking about when it came to men and women, when I'm talking about like people who use sex as a coping skill, they are using sex as a coping mechanism. They are going from person to person because they are using these people as their medicine. They are using these people as a distraction. They're using other people's bodies as a way of not having to deal with their own, not a way to have to not deal with themselves, because you're distracting me long enough. I'm getting a high off of this sex long enough that it dulls out all these other feelings and emotions that I'm running from and I don't want to have to deal with.
And then it could be just one person too. Like, yeah, like, ain't no talking, it just keep sex. Oh, that's all you want to do is because you're not thinking at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a way of, because humans were built for connection. Even those of us who are like, I love my alone time, we're still built for connection. We're still built for bonds, because people need interaction. But sometimes having an actual relationship, having a relationship with folks makes you have to face yourself, because one, you start being aware of what they're doing and how what they're doing now makes you feel, how you interact, and how you blah, blah, blah. And a way to avoid that, because you still need relation, but you don't want a deep relation. So what you do is you get people who have sexual relations. So they're technically there. I'm technically there. We are technically here, but we're not actually talking, because that talking part is going to be too revealing to you. It's going to cause you to have to deal with too much of your own shit. Yeah. They might call you out on some stuff. They might point out your flaws. They might trigger you. They might, I know one thing for me, for a long time, I had an issue with self-sabotaging in relationships. And I had to come to the point that I realized that I self-sabotage and I would detach easily because I didn't like the feeling of being vulnerable. And once I got to a point where I now had to be vulnerable in order for us to continue, I would just self-sabotage because I did not like that feeling. It would trigger something in me. And like, kind of like we're talking about before, like I could physically feel myself going back to the moments where I lost my trust, going back to the moments where I felt abandoned, going back to those moments where I felt vulnerable and defenseless, and it triggered something in me to be like, nope, I'm not feeling that again. So I would just leave. I just cut off. I would just find a reason to go. I would just, and I taught myself to detach out of that, which was my coping mechanism, teaching myself to detach before I got to that vulnerable point because I did not want to feel that feeling.
At all, yeah.
Another one, though, that I think is a big part of why we, especially as women, we have that whole, that's a part of like some of our anxiety is that whole strong woman trope. And we did an episode on this in season 1. The audio is horrible, guys. We are working on it. Give me time. Okay, I do not do this professionally. But we did cover that. But when we talk about the strong woman trope, we're talking about that whole idea. And I can only speak as a Black woman because I'm a Black woman and this is how it is in my culture. But there is this idea of like, you have to be a strong Black woman, okay? You have to be I can handle it all by myself. You have to be a like boss chick. You have to be like blah, blah, blah. And that causes a lot of anxiety for us because most of the time we do want somebody else there to help. We do have our moments of weakness. And then it's like, dang, I can't break down because I'm supposed to be the strong person.
And it has to be, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you're starting to hear an echo now on social media. I've been seeing a lot more. I've been seeing all these types of like reels and TikTok videos of Black women like meditating or shopping or like being hugged up on by their partner. And you'll hear like in the background, you'll see a quote that's like, I no longer wish to be characterized as strong. I want to be seen as soft and plush, and I want to be taken care of, and I want to blah, blah, blah. And we're kind of taking back our power with that because there is this whole thing of like, oh, well, you know, you're a strong woman, you should be able to do that on your own. And then it's like a catch-22 because then people expect us to be strong so they don't look out for us and see if we need help. If we need to be, you know, if we need someone to be our Superman now, if we need someone to come help us, come save us, come whatever, ever. And I think this kind of also builds up that anxiety. I know for me, this definitely was a thing. I used to take a lot of pride in being able to be like, oh, I do stuff on my own. But like over time, realizing how exhausting that was for me to feel like I always had to be strong. And I remember like going through things and then not feeling like I could talk to anybody about them because I'm the strong one and they're not going to expect that from me. Mm-hmm. Or even when I would like hint at certain things like, oh yeah, you know, I'm not doing that great. And people, well, you got it, girl. Anyways, let me talk to you about my problems. Mm-hmm. And it started to be like a catch-22 because it was like, not only does no one step in to check on me, but then even when I tried to be like, hey, it was like, no one took it serious. Everybody was just like, you got this, girl.
Oh, yeah. I think that's the same. I have those same things. It was recently, this lady at my church was like, she was giving me clothes because she doesn't get to see her granddaughter as often. So these are new clothes. So she just giving them to me. And then her mother was like, oh, I told her, no, she doesn't have to give those to you because you and your family are good. You're good over there. I said, excuse me? I said, my family takes care of them and I take care of me and my daughter. I would like to have those clothes. Like, I said, you don't know. I said, you don't know what's going on in my household. I would like to have those. It's like, we still have our struggles too. Like, my child is growing all the time. I am still a single mother. I need assistance. So often it's just like, I always had to. So now at this point in my life, it's just, I'm tired. I'm tired of doing all of this stuff. Like, when is it going to be a break time for me now? Because it's just like, I can do everything. I know I can do everything, but it comes a time where you just get seriously exhausted. And it's like, did I set myself up for this? You know, because I always never ask for help. I never do really. I'm like, yeah, I never do. So it's just like, but you get tired. You get tired. And it's overwhelmingly tired. Like, I don't care about being that strong stuff no more. Like, and I can't, and that's the thing too, like even if I started like dating, it's just like, I'm not gonna be able to help you in a lot of stuff right now. So we gonna have to see, can you help me out before I start putting my side in, because I know for a fact I can do this, but the way I'm set up and the way that I'm tired, it's like I don't have room but to do anything except for with my child, and I'm struggling with that right now. So it's just like, yeah, it is a catch-22, like you said. I was just piggybacking on that, but I definitely just had that conversation with myself, like, sis, you tired. That's what it is. You're tired. I'm taking care of everything because you're not meant to be that way. Like, you don't need somebody, but that's just how it is. Like, you want that though, that companionship and stuff. Yeah. So yeah.
When it comes to, you have brought up relationships, and that's the interesting point. When it comes to relationships, I've always been in relationships where mentally I felt like I was doing everything. Like, I definitely, definitely the guys would be like, oh, let me pay for dinner, let me get your nails done, things like that. But I was used to being in relationships where mentally, emotionally, I was the only person doing labor. And some of that, it was because of my profession. Some of that is coming because of my personality. Because when I love people, I want to take care of you. I want to check on your mental health. I want to make sure you're not stressed. I want to make your day better. I want to see how I can help ease your pain. I want to make sure you are coming home to a stress-free home. I can't say that all the way. I got a lot of questions. I be having questions. You can't just, but no, like, I am very much aware of, like,
lay it out.
Yeah, I'm very hyper aware of others' feelings and emotions. I pick up on others' feelings and emotions very easily. So I'm usually very hyper aware of your emotions, so forth. But I didn't really have that. It was one of the conversations I had to have with myself recently where I was just like, no, going forth, I need partnership where they check in on my feelings. They check in on and I want to be vulnerable. I want to, don't know what that's going to look like. Never did that shit before, but I want to see what it's like. And I think that's something I need at this point in my life, where you are checking in on my feelings. You are checking in on what's going on with you, babe. How is your day? Let me talk to you about you. Because one of the things I was recently talking to a friend about, it was just privacy. She was talking to me and she was like, dang, me and you definitely known each other for 5 years. And I had said something to her that I don't want to share on air, but she was like, I had no idea. And I was just like, oh yeah, girl, this is a thing. And she was asking me at the time, there was somebody I had dated seriously in like maybe 2 years ago. And she had asked, were they aware? And I was like, oh no, that's not a thing. She was like, how are you spending 3 days a week with a person and they don't know that? And then we got into this whole conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how I am in all my relationships. And I was like, and it's not even me purposely trying to hide it. It's just, I was taught very early on that you have to guard certain things. You have to, secrecy. Secrecy was a big part of my childhood. And I'm like, no, going forth, after having that conversation with her, I was like, you know what? No, going forth, but I do want transparency. I do want to be like, look, this is 100% what you're getting. And not so much, because I feel like I always did that, but I was more so like, this is 100% what you're getting. I don't talk about these things. I don't blah, 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 blah. But now I want to be like, no, this is 100% you're getting. These are things that are hard for me to talk about, but this is a part of being with me. This is a part of who I am. And I want that from that person as well. But going into that strong woman trope is that whole, and I don't even think this is just for strong women. I think this is something that a lot of people of color get told by their parents. There was a episode from Scandal, Olivia Pope, and there was an episode where her mom was being interviewed. She went through this long monologue. And in this monologue, she was talking about how as a Black woman, she was like, I have to be smarter. It's not okay for me to be average because my excellence gets considered with others mediocre. It's not enough to be good. You have to be best. It's not enough to be talented. You have to be extraordinary. You have to be blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people of color get told, male or female, get told this by their parents. Like, I know this was something I grew up in. There was a period of my life where I lived in another country. And when I was in another country, like, that was the first time my parents talked to me about race. Because I was going through something, I did not know what it was. Because even though the school I went to when I was living in America had Black kids, white kids, Hispanic kids, Asian kids, it was not as prevalent because I was young, I was in elementary. Then when I moved to this other country and people were treating me like I was the first Black person they had ever met in their whole entire life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my dad had to like break it down to me. And my dad had to tell me like, yo, you can't just be good, because I was getting teachers calling my dad, sending emails like, well, she's not doing enough and she's blah, 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 really trying to make it seem like I was lazy. No one seemed to care that like I was in a country where I did not speak the language. And maybe that's why I was behind, because like I had one particular school, there was a tutor that would come. And sometimes for certain classes, she was too busy. She had to be with another kid that couldn't speak the language. But like no one, like, every now and then I think about that experience and I'll just be like, dang, I really got all those whippings. And like no one really sat there and was just like, hey, maybe she's not lazy. Maybe she didn't.
We never.
Look, I was making C's in a class that I did not know what they were saying. Why didn't I get credit for that?
Good. You were doing very good.
Yeah. But you know what? That experience made me really tough on myself. Like after that experience, I don't think it really changed something in me, because at that point in time was like the first time I'm like, yo, people are watching you more closely for error. At that time, I became very aware of how society scrutinized my moves in comparison to my peers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I would like whisper I had a friend who spoke English in one of my class. And so sometimes I would whisper to her like, okay, what did she just say? And she would whisper back and then I would get yelled at. And I would try to explain to my teacher like, oh, I didn't understand because you won't say it in English. So I'm asking the person to translate and I would like get yelled at. Meanwhile, there's kids throwing paper airplanes like she's ignoring, like stuff like that. And it really put in me like, okay. And I kept that. And I still have that. In me like, I feel like I watch more closely for error. And so it makes me even more hypervigilant about what I'm doing, and people are paying attention to me and how close of attention they're paying to me. And the truth of the matter is people usually aren't paying as much attention to us as we think they are.
Think at all. Yeah.
Yeah. People might see you do something stupid and they'll laugh for the moment and then they forget and go on about their life. Meanwhile, you get a flashback 10 years later at 2 a.m. You're like, I'm so stupid. They think I'm an idiot. But girl, they ain't thinking about you. After that moment, they forgot. Yeah.
It's anxiety because that's something I do. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
So another thing that we tend to do is we just process our achievements differently. And we tell ourselves like, I'm not anything unless I do this, or I never became the doctor that I wanted to be as a child. So I'm still literally like nothing. I have friends that think that way. And it's sad because it takes over her whole life. But and just knowing that if we take baby steps to go to our goals, that can help. But just setting those high standards, well, not high standards, but you don't have to put yourself in a category and belittling yourself because you haven't achieved some things.
Yeah, I agree with that too, though. I think for a long time I was in the mindset of like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to show I'm at this level. I have to show that I'm advancing. I have to blah, blah, blah. And I think the problem with that, there's a lot of problems with that, but one, it doesn't allow you to be present. And that's a big part of combating anxiety, because a lot of times when you have anxiety, it's because you're either living in the past or you're living in the future. A lot of times if you can just ground yourself and be in the present and enjoy what is, that will cut down on a lot of our anxiety. And I think for me, that was a big thing. I was constantly thinking about the next thing. So even when I accomplished something, I didn't get a chance to enjoy it much because I had to accomplish something else. And
just wishing your present day away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a horrible feeling when you look back on it.
You
remember things
at all. At all.
That's sad. Yeah.
One of the reasons I recommend journaling so much, even though I don't journal, I personally don't, but I have my other ways. But one of the reasons why I recommend journaling so much is because you can capture a moment and you can capture your excitement. You can capture a moment. You can capture when you did not achieve that. You did not have that. And you can remind yourself, because sometimes we forget how far we came. And you can go back to your pages and be like, dang, I was here. I was hoping I had what I have. I was, I didn't even, this is more than what I even thought. And you're able to see your progress, because I think sometimes when you're in that mindset of I always have to get something else, I have to achieve something else, you forget
You forget that you did it. Like, that is true.
You forget how hard it is.
Yeah, I look back at stuff sometimes, and I done achieved every single thing on that list. I'm like, I don't even know how I did it, and I never looked at this list, but it's just like, I did it though. I mean, I have so much anxiety about, I have so much to do, and I'm not getting anything done. I look back, and I actually did. So I agree on the journaling thing, even though I don't get to do it so often. But when I go back and read my stuff, it'd be some good stuff, or I see where I was at that time and how sad I was and how I have overcome those emotions and feelings. So
yeah,
I agree about the journey situation.
I agree. One of the other things I do think is important that we also bring up is sometimes we don't recognize anxiety for anxiety. And I think also others don't recognize anxiety for anxiety when it comes to people of color, especially. I think sometimes our anxiety is looked at as something else. And there's been studies on this as well. I wish I remember her name. There's a Black psychologist who has a couple different articles and has done a couple different segments or different podcasts and shows about this. But she talks about how anxiety, particularly in people who are Black, oftentimes gets labeled as like anger or aloofness or like detachment, and we aren't really given the benefit of the doubt that maybe this is for example, children. So one of the things I'll talk about is I get children all the time that I come across with in my field, in my career, where teachers or parents want me to be like, this is a what is that one they always like to use?
Oppositional defiance.
Yeah. For example, with like a lot of times, especially my little Black boys, teachers, sometimes parents want me to come in and be like, because this is oppositional defiant disorder. My first job out, I worked for Children Protection Services, and it seemed like all my little Black boys came in with that diagnosis. Oppositional defiant disorder, particularly, is one that I focus a lot on because a lot of times it's not that. A lot of times people are looking at, okay, hey, he was in an abusive household, then got taken away from his parents, and then got placed with strangers. Maybe this is PTSD. Maybe we should look at, oh, he's acting out, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he grew up in a cycle of abuse. I think that makes sense. He's acting out. Hey, you took him away from the only environment he knows. Even if it was a bad one, it's the only one he knows, and you put him with complete strangers. Maybe we should look into how that would affect a child.
That is true.
And it's one of those things that, they're saying all of our kids are having this disorder, and why is no one looking at it? I can bring a white boy in this room that has the same ones, and everybody wants to give him the lesser diagnosis. And this is a thing that unfortunately is somewhat common in the field, but not even going outside of like in the field and therapy and all that stuff, even in our everyday lives, sometimes, you hear Black women talking about it. Like, I can't even ask a question without being stereotyped as an angry Black woman. I know me, myself, though, like I've had this experience before. I lived in Oklahoma. I was only there for like a couple months. I was living there very short period of time. Absolutely hated it. But when I was there, I was working at a job. And at this job, I did have one person of color who worked there with me. However, they were one of those people who wanted to prove how closer to white they were. Just one of those. So I didn't have that person, but we were working or whatever. And I remember we were off the clock. It was time to go home. All the clients had left, and they decided to play some like Justin Timberlake music, and they were like all dancing around. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm packing up to get my stuff. And I had packed up to get my stuff, and I was like, all right, I'll see y'all. And I went home. The next day I came in, my boss wanted to have a meeting with me. And in the meeting, she told me she wanted to talk to me because she did not feel like I was a team player and that I was trying to like get to know my other colleagues and so forth. Because I did not want to stay after hours to dance to Justin Timberlake with them.
Exactly.
And we had a whole conversation about like my attitude and like whatever. And they held on to that until the time I quit. every time I met with her, it was always like a new issue. And it kept going back to like, well, because we just, are you happy here? Are you gelling? Because it just really doesn't seem like, and whenever it came to it, it was always because of something like that, where it was like, this is not a part of my job. This is not what I have to do. But also because that happened almost immediately after I started. And keep in mind, at the time, I had responsibilities outside of work I had to like drive and get to at a certain time. So I didn't have time to stay after with y'all and so forth. But that's how they started it off. And the whole time I was there, that ended up being a consistent thing with me. And I remember like having this moment of being like, so that has nothing to do with my attitude. I have commitments outside of my work. But after that, it felt like I got labeled a certain way. And they held on to that label until I left. And then not only that, because they held on to that, I started feeling uncomfortable when I had to be around them for long periods of time. I started getting very anxious because I was very hyper aware of like, okay, they're looking for a reason to pick with me. They are looking for a reason to add to that whole angry Black woman thing. And so I was really quiet into myself and I'm like, I'm just going to do my job. I'm going to chop it up with the clients. I'm going to do what I can there. But like when it comes to y'all, I'm going to keep to myself. I'm blah, blah, blah. But then even that was turned into, okay, well, yeah, it just seems, you don't really talk a lot. You don't really speak up. And it just, sometimes it just gives out the vibe that you don't want to be here. Where what was going on with me is I was anxious.
Yeah.
I was always anxious around y'all. And so, but like, it goes back to like, not even us, but sometimes even other people, our anxiety isn't even looked at as anxiety. So it might be a while before we even realize that like, that is what's going on, that this is not anger. This is anxiety. This is not aloofness. This is me being nervous. This is what nervousness looks like on me.
I get that aloofness thing too. It's like you're just not here, but it's just like I don't know how to act really. I'm just trying to figure out, I don't know, the atmosphere. It's easier for me having anxiety to stay to myself than try to talk if I don't feel comfortable. I just don't know how you guys really feel about me.
Yeah.
Too many thoughts go through my head about it. So
yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like this is why I detached. It was easier to just go into a detachment mode than to stay present in my body and feel those feelings. And so, let's talk about what some of the symptoms of anxiety looks like. Obviously not a complete list, but some of those symptoms looks like actual physical anxiety attack, like racing heart, butterflies in our stomach, feeling a tightness in our chest, that feeling of anxiousness or feeling afraid out of nowhere, that feeling of like being on the edge and being irritable. And sometimes it even looks like engaging in compulsive behaviors. Sometimes people, when they get anxious, they'll develop like a compulsion of something they have to do to calm themselves down. So these are the people that like are pacing back and forth when they're anxious, or they'll start hitting their hand on things, or kids that like hit themselves or hit their heads, especially when they're like toddlers and stuff. That's a lot of times them showing their anxiousness. They don't know how to get it out of their body. So they start feeling a compulsion to do things. Sometimes it can look like avoiding people or places. Sometimes anxiety looks like intrusive flashbacks or memories or nightmares. Sometimes it looks like not being able to concentrate because we have that anxiety building up. It's hard for us to stay on task. And it can also look like headaches or sometimes other types of chronic illness, because for some people, when you don't address your mental health, it starts showing out physically. How it manifests itself that way. I know this is a thing for me. When I am too stressed and I do not control the situation quickly, I'll all of a sudden get sick. And this happens to me all the time. That's how I know, like, when I get sick out of nowhere, I'm like, okay, I need to slow down.
Yeah,
this is my body break.
Remember your body was doing all of that at one time.
Yeah, I had a high stress job and I started getting really, really sick. And it was a long period. It was a couple months where I was in the doctors like every other week. They're running tests on me, trying to figure out like, okay, what's going on? And basically one doctor finally told me, after they done sent me to all these specialists, he was like, I think you're stressed. He was like, and your body is just fighting itself. And he was like, I guarantee you stop, you find a way to control. Like, he legit told me I need to quit my job. He was just like, he was like, I promise you, he was like, that's going to control itself. And it did. The next time I had that happen to me, same thing. I was in a very, very stressful job, very stressful environment, very stressful just period in my life. And that's when I was like, you know what? I need to leave here. This is my body telling me that I cannot maintain this. And of course, the answer isn't always leaving. I tried to do multiple things and brought up multiple ways that we can alleviate the stress for everybody, and advocacy, and advocated for my team, but nobody wanted to. And so I had to decide, okay, either I'm going to continue on this and allow it to break down my mental health and my physical health, or I'm going to remove myself from this situation.
Yeah.
And trust the process. So some of the things that keep us stuck in this cycle of anxiousness and anxiety and stop us from actually having breakthroughs is things like justification. And this is when we tell ourselves like, hey, this is normal. This is normal. I don't need to do anything about it. And sometimes this can look like us minimizing how we're really feeling, or it can be our family and friends doing that. When we're like, okay, I'm just so anxious. They're so, girl, you just got bad nerves. You good. You'll handle it, whatever. We justify like, oh, okay, well, I'm an adult and this is just what adulthood looks like.
Yeah.
Some other stigmas that kind of keep us in this loop. Sometimes it's religion. Sometimes it's telling people, well, girl, just pray on it. Sometimes it's telling people, well, just go let the pastor lay hands. Look, I don't care what your religion is. You can have that religion, but also understand that whatever God you believe in, whatever spirituality you practice, that there are also real physical things that we can do to help. And sometimes maybe that answer to that prayer looks like therapy. Sometimes the answer to that prayer looks like medication. Sometimes the answer to that prayer is actually getting up and doing something.
Even if it's prayer, even if it's Christian, it's just like somewhere in it also says you got to do the work too.
Yeah.
Like the same scripture said you got to pray, so you got to do that work too. Like you can pray to God, but you still need therapy as well, or you still need those medications as well.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of keeps us stuck is, especially in Black and brown communities, is when it comes to mental health, saying, girl, that's some white people shit. Mm-hmm. And then leaving at that and just not addressing it. Mental health don't care about your race. It don't care about your age. It don't care about your gender. It don't care about your depression is real. Anxiety is real. Schizophrenia is real. Uncle Tay, he's not just like his daddy. That's schizophrenia. Okay? Big Mike, cousin Big Mike, it's not just as simple as, that boy just got bad nerves. No, Mike has PTSD. Mm-hmm. And we have to normalize talking about that in our communities. Mm-hmm. And we have to get away from we have to destigmatize mental health and get away from the idea, oh, that's crazy people. Mm-hmm. That's those, that ain't nothing wrong with that boy. That boy just hard-headed. Okay, let's talk about why he's hard-headed. Where did that hard-headedness come from? Is there,
It's a reason.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we can cope. Neek, you want to start on the first one?
Yes. Okay. One thing that we can do to lessen our anxiety is seek therapy. I know we talk about this a lot, but it's because it really works. Finding the right therapist and allowing them to help you and keeping you accountable for those things and checking in and just seeing what works and what doesn't work. And it just helps you to just have all these tools to get through your anxiety. And even if it's not going away, we can definitely talk about ways to work through them easier. Anxiety.
Yeah. And I know people are like, okay, of course y'all gonna say therapy, but here's the reason why there's such a big push for therapy. There is so much power in being able to talk about things out loud. Mm-hmm. And the reason why therapy is so encouraging. Yeah, is one, it's a neutral person, not your friend that's gonna hype you up and be like, yeah, girl, they wrong. Sometimes you need a neutral person who's not involved, that has nothing to lose or gain from this, to really ask you the right questions. Your therapist should not be telling you what to do. Your therapist should just be there helping you sort through your thoughts. And And you need a neutral person to do that. Also, you need somebody that's trained to know different techniques. And I know people are like, well, I can just Google and I can do these by myself. Look, there's a reason why you have to go through 6 years of school, 3 years of supervision, all of that before you can be a clinically licensed therapist. Okay. There's a reason for that. And that's because it's not as simple as you Googling and reading a guide. It's the reason why you have someone who went to school that long to learn these techniques and learn when to use them and when not to. There's certain techniques that you can do that is not right for you and will just make things worse. You have people that are trained to recognize what triggers are, because a lot of times we don't recognize them. Sometimes it takes another person saying that for us to be like, oh, I do that? That's a thing? Huh, you're right. This is a cycle for me. This is a thing for me. Another one that you can use to combat anxiety is really, I know we say this all the time, but spending time with yourself and practicing being present and feeling your feelings. Allow yourself to be in tune with what you're feeling and processing what you're feeling. Instead of like, I'm feeling anxious, you know what, let me go get this bottle of wine so I can relax. And I'm guilty of doing that too, by the way, guys. Like, I definitely get anxious and be like,
yeah.
And then I call it self-care because I add in bubble bath.
Yeah, I was saying the same time.
Not a single issue
to do it.
Right. Girl, did you get some wine and take a bath? Not a single problem has been solved either.
I'm just singing my songs in the tub. That's all I'm doing.
I'm just going to sleep a little bit easier tonight. It's going to be there in the morning.
Yes.
But being able to, as someone who like, this is something I consciously have to do, I have to force myself to do it. It's something I've been really working really hard on for the last like 2 years. It's really important to be able to sit with yourself and recognize that, and recognize, why am I feeling this way? Okay, this triggered me. Why did that trigger me? Because this is something that you may never really dealt with.
Yeah.
You know, for example, it can be the self-sabotage. Okay, why do you keep self-sabotaging in relationships? You self-sabotage, you end it, and then you miss them a month later, 3 months later, and so forth. But then why did you end it? Why did you leave? Why didn't you communicate? Okay, why? I'm sitting with my feelings. Okay, you felt triggered. Okay, but why did you feel triggered? Well, because you felt vulnerable and you did not like that feeling. But why don't you feel comfortable feeling vulnerable? Well, because when you feel too vulnerable, you wonder about the fear of being abandoned. And when you wonder about the fear of being abandoned, Dad, you start feeling old feelings. You start having old flashbacks. You start feeling very painful things that when they happened at that time, you didn't allow yourself to feel them. You ran from it. And this situation is telling you, hey, we're going to cause that feeling again. So sit here and feel that and go through it, or run. And you decide to run, so you self-sabotage.
Yeah.
You know, that was a whole process for me to sit and realize that and figure that out. And then I have to sit with myself and go, okay, now I have to learn about how to love healthy. I have to learn about how to communicate healthy. I have to learn how to express, hey, you know what? That made me feel vulnerable. And I really don't like feeling vulnerable, because I don't trust that you won't abandon me. I don't trust that you won't let me down. And I don't take being let down very well, because, you know, it was a whole thing for me. And so having to sit and spend time with your feelings and process that, it can be painful, it can be hurtful, but like, that's how you grow. That's how you get to those things that you want, that you keep saying to yourself, like, why don't I have this? I keep saying I want this, but I don't have it. Well, because you don't allow yourself to go through the process. And sometimes the process is painful, but that's how you get to that. You want happiness, love, commitment, all those things. Okay, you got to figure out how to stop self-sabotaging. How do you do that? Learn to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Learn to communicate. Learn to, you know, all those things. That's just one example.
Another coping skill that can be used is yoga. I know this is like yoga and also meditating. I know recently, for me personally, when I was able to go out of town and do self-care, I actually got to do yoga. And so I did it, like, it was like at a rooftop, and we like did yoga, and it was just like so freeing. Like, my mind was at ease. I felt at peace. it like grounded me, could come back to reality and not be so frantic about everything that's going on, and then to just it in the whole yoga session with a meditation made it even more better. And I got to just like feel my emotions, and I haven't been that calm in a while. So I just think it like calms your feelings and calms your fears, and let you think about them without anxious thoughts attached to them. And I think it really just helps. That's just from my example, my perspective. But you have anything to say about it?
Yeah, well, the whole thing with yoga, like I know now we think yoga and we think of like tight bodies that can contort themselves in really cute spanks. But like yoga is actually a ancient practice that is about grounding yourself, essentially. It's about being present. It was a part of spirituality. Yeah. And that's why you have that, and why you hear people say all the time, like, oh, we'll try yoga, because it is kind of going back to that book we were talking about, The Body Keeps the Score. It's making you be in tune with your body, and it's making you be in tune with what is going on with me now in the presence. It's why when you do yoga, a lot of times you hear them do things like because it's one of those things that's supposed to clear your mind of everything else so you can be more in tune.
Yeah. And it's not an easy practice. My body, you feel everything in your body too. You feel different ways. It's just like, that's another relaxing technique that I work with the kids, like tightening their muscles, tightening their calves, tightening their feet. Like it brings you back to reality, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, another thing is medication. I know some people aren't too keen on medications, but sometimes it's an imbalance in your body.
Yeah, it's not needed for everybody. For some people, you don't need it. But if you feel like you are always in fight or flight mode, that might be something you want to talk to your doctor about. It's not for everybody, but if you are struggling, you already tried all these other coping mechanisms and they're not working, definitely talk to your doctor about it. I feel like we used to be kind of like, I don't want to take those meds. They give them pills for everything. But I think we're starting to come to a point where it's like, okay, I appreciate that we now have pills for this, but this is something I don't just have to live with.
I'm going to take them. Yeah.
Yeah. And another one that you can do, kind of like we always say, is do more self-care. And I want us to be clear. Self-care can be a lot of things. Yes, self-care can mean getting your nails done. It can mean going out for a picnic. But sometimes self-care is taking yourself out of situations that cause you anxiety.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's self-care. Sometimes self-care is saying no. Sometimes self-care is having boundaries. Sometimes self-care is walking away from things and people that no longer serve you, that add to your anxiety. So you have to sit there and figure out what self-care is for you. I know me right now, my biggest self-care is, one, sticking to my boundaries. And boundaries really didn't used to be an issue for me in most places except for when it came to family. And when it came to family, it didn't used to be an issue for me because I live very far away from my family. So I didn't really have to deal with it a lot. Like, dang, I got to deal with it on Christmas and, Thanksgiving. But other than that, I didn't really have to deal with it. But I'm now closer to family and I have to deal with it on a daily basis. But having that has been really helpful for me because I did have a certain increase of anxiety when family came and lived with me, and I had to be with family every day. My anxiety levels were increasing and I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, why? They're not doing anything. Why is my anxiety increasing? And then I realized, oh, you're being triggered about a couple things. Okay. So you need to start putting in some boundaries so this won't be a thing that happens all the time. So for me, I know boundaries is a big part of my self-care right now. Also, a big part of my self-care is going out into nature, which is really difficult because I have a love-hate relationship with nature. It's very easy for me to ground in nature. I think I've talked about this before. I love going out to a park or somewhere, sitting on the grass and reading with wine. I mean, I don't know wine, but I love doing that. But also I hate like mosquitoes and insects. So it clashes. But even like the beach, I realize I love going to read at the beach. There's something about the seagulls and hearing the waves. I love water. I don't really like being in water, but I like being around it. But I recognize that like that's a big part of self-care for me. And so now I make sure once a week, we just got some patio patio furniture, just little stuff, so I could go and sit on my patio, so I don't have to drive to a park all the time, so I could do it more frequently. But I'll go out on my patio and I'll sit and I'll get some hot tea and I'll just sit outside in nature and just like listen to the grasshoppers while I'm reading, while I'm drinking my tea, and it helps ground me so much.
Yeah. I think with self-care, just finding what works for you, because what works for others may not be your thing. But just finding that thing and taking the time out to do it. Also setting boundaries and saying no. And if you don't feel like it, don't do it. So sometimes just don't do it. That's what I'd say about those.
So that is all we have for today's episode, guys. We hope that you guys enjoy. As always, be sure to follow us on Instagram at She Wolf Alchemy. If you could, head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. Leave us a review with some words. Other than that, guys, you'll have a new episode for us next Thursday. And bye.
Bye.